Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake, and I'm here with Lindsey Deluce and Kelsey McEwen. Welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
This week, a warning call to Canadians about your personal health data being sold off to the pharma industry. We speak with the researcher who exposed the problem and what you need to know coming up.
We speak to him about learning to live through unspeakable loss.
Kelsey, welcome back to Your Morning. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
So with this book, with this memoir, you're introducing readers and your fans to your late sister. What do you most want people to know about Karen?
Well, of course, I lay it out in the book pretty much, but to love her as I love her, it's still a love that is alive and vibrant, and she is, when I remember her, and that, of course, is the point, a brother remembers, but it's a very important word to me, and to remember her means to introduce her to the rest of the world in a way that I can, which I'm very happy that I was actually allowed to do this for her, because she was an amazing young woman, and it was a loss to the whole world.
Well, and she passed away in 1975, 50 years ago, almost to the month, actually. So, I mean, for you, why is now the right time to be telling this story? I know you've been carrying this with you for 50 years. What made this the right time?
I think it was a kind of a gift from my sister to unburden myself from a piece of life that I still held on to that was not helping me anymore. And maybe never helped me, but I couldn't have shaken it until I got a little older. But 50 years later, I finally am more familiar with the joy that we had together than the pain of her taking off. And her death, I couldn't think of anything else for a long, long time. And I did a disservice. And I'm sorry I did, but I think I've made up for it now. I'm very happy with how the book turned out. And I hope that people read it.
In terms of the grieving process, obviously grieving a loved one at any time is incredibly difficult going through that process. I cannot imagine the added layers of grief and complexity when someone is taken so senselessly and so young from loved ones. So if I may ask, sir, how did you learn to navigate that grieving process without drowning in the dark manner in which she passed?
I did do a little drowning. I did some, or at least I'd go underwater for a while and have to do the 1, 2, 3 thing, and finally come up for air. I would still fight my way back to sanity, and because there is, there's an enormous life force in us all, and it wouldn't let me quit. It wouldn't, even if I wanted to. Sometimes something would pull me back out. Maybe that was Karen. Sometimes maybe it was just my own sense of I'm going to survive. I'm going to make this. I'm going to fight this. But the drowning thing is very tempting, and of course I did curse God, and I went through all sorts of things with. Kind of an anger with the universe, and I did get through that. And then, for whatever reason, this final unburdening was actually it has given me a sense of lightness that I never had before, that I could actually live 100% again, and that's been. Right. I mean, I feel like I've just started again, which is pretty fascinating. To be as far along as I am in this journey, and yet feel like I'm just starting, is an extraordinary thing.
Something you've said before about Karen and in the context of this book that I think is amazing and just really beautiful and kind of speaks to your soul. You've said that the mission is to heal, but the mission is to also help others heal. So if somebody's watching this interview right now and suffering from the loss of a loved one, regardless of the circumstances around that loss, what would you say to them? How could you help them heal?
What I've learned, what I think is of the greatest value is to understand and recognize that the grief will always be part of you. The grief is not going to go away. But what you can do is hopefully balance it out. Sometimes grief is so close that that's all you have. But to reacquaint yourselves with all the joy that you had with that person, even if it was just short-lived, even if it was just brief and fleeting, but at least that joy can stand and mirror the grief and be as present in your recollection. Be as forceful in your understanding of what that life meant to you, so that the grieving doesn't corrupt the joy. That's what I can offer.
There's growing concern over how the personal health data of millions of Canadians is being used and sold without them knowing.
A new study reveals that some private health clinics are giving data companies access to patients' digital medical records, and that information is then being sold to pharmaceutical companies.
I'll tell you as a side, when the segment airs, I immediately got several texts about it from concerned viewers. So to help us better understand what's happening, we spoke with the lead author of the study, Dr. Cheryl Spitoff.
So your study says that Canada's medical data industry is what you describe a network of complex reciprocal relationships. Explain to us how the system works.
Yeah, sure. So we identified 2 commercial data brokers, each claiming to have between 1 and 2 million Canadian primary care medical records. From interviews and company documents, we learned that they acquired these records through relationships with for-profit primary care clinics, chains of clinics. For both of them, these 2 companies, their primary client was the pharmaceutical industry, but they had different approaches to monetizing the data.
And I guess my question is, after looking into this story, is what's the get for the clinics? Because they're not directly selling the information. So what's the benefit to the clinics then?
Yeah, great question. So there's 2 different models, 2 different approaches. In the first model, they actually are selling the data. So the chains of clinics sell the data to the commercial data broker who de-identifies the records and then largely makes money by running analytics for the pharmaceutical companies. They also do offer the data sets for sale, but participants told us it was largely through running analytics that they made their money. In the other model, in what we've been calling the vertically integrated model, the data broker actually owns the chain of primary care clinics. And then in this model, they make their money a bit differently. They make their money by developing algorithms for pharmaceutical companies that identify and target patients with drug interventions. They do this.
Keep going.
They do this in 3 steps. So in the first step, the pharmaceutical company pays the data broker to develop an algorithm that will identify patients who have health conditions that may make them eligible for the company's drug. Then in the second step, with the physician's permission, they run this algorithm on the medical records, identify relevant patients, and then they provide that list of patients along with treatment recommendations to the physicians. And then in the final step, they report that information back to the pharmaceutical company, aggregate data.
And nowhere in any of those information that you've given us do you hear that the patients have any rights or knowledge of what is happening. This is all done between physicians and the companies. Your research also claims that the health data being sold could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So what is the risk then to patients?
Yeah, so we've identified a number of risks. One is that this is likely to give the pharmaceutical industry increased control over medical practices. So we're likely to see more of a focus on expensive, new, on-patent drugs rather than perhaps just as appropriate or more appropriate older drugs or other treatment modalities like exercise or physio or counseling, less of a focus on prevention and treating upstream causes. We're also very concerned about how the data are being used. Anytime data are being shared, there's privacy risks to patients. And then finally, and I would argue most importantly, this is not how patients want their data to be used. Patients are generally fine with sharing their data if it's going to be used for research and health system improvement, if it's going to be held by a trusted public or nonprofit organization with transparency and oversight and patient involvement. But they're very reluctant to have their data shared or held with for-profit companies.
First of all, I have 2 other questions. First of all, is this legal? Have they found a loophole? And secondly, can a patient, when they sit down in an office, say, by the way, I don't want any of my data shared? Do they have that right? And does the clinic have the responsibility then to not share it?
Yes, good question. Sorry. So in the first model, the conventional model, when the data are sold, because they're de-identified, in Ontario at least, they fall outside of the scope of the law. There was a recent ruling from the Privacy Commissioner, and the patients are notified, but you aren't able to opt out. So the only real option is not to attend that clinic. In the second model, it's unclear if it's legal or not. The data that are being accessed by the data broker are not de-identified. Physicians are giving their consent to allow this to happen, but I think it's an area that needs transparency and oversight, and we need to, figure out what's happening there and if we need additional legislation and regulation to better protect that data.
They are the bedrock of our healthcare system, and they're being asked to do even more.
The job of a nurse is evolving. Nurses can also opt to focus on research, help shape policy, or come up with new ideas that move healthcare forward.
So on the show, nurse practitioner, researcher Rachel Olivier joined us to talk about how the nursing profession is evolving.
So how has the job of a nurse evolved over the years?
Nursing, as we know, is such a diverse profession, and our roles have expanded greatly over the past several decades, which is exciting to see. And the evolution of nursing in Canada has been marked by significant shifts in education, practice, and organization. So we know, for example, that early nursing focused primarily on community-based care and gradually transitioned to hospital-based models, eventually leading to more specialized and advanced practice roles. But now the evolution of nursing has been and continues to be influenced by factors like technological advancements, increased patient complexity, changing healthcare delivery models, as well as the rise of professionalization among nurses. So as the needs of our population continue to evolve and shift, nursing as a profession will be required to evolve along with that as well.
It is so fascinating. And I hear that you have said before, there's so many ways to be a nurse. So what do you mean by that? What are some examples?
So in addition to providing clinical care, nurses are situated and involved in roles that include everything from policy work and research to advocacy, leadership, education, government, nonprofit work. And some specific examples of these diverse roles and opportunities include positions such as being the COO or CEO of a hospital or health center, serving on the Senate, being a forensic nurse, or advanced practice roles such as that of a clinical nurse specialist or a nurse practitioner. And the fact is, nurses can and do wear so many hats, and opportunities within the profession are growing at an unprecedented rate. And I think this is what makes nursing such an innovative and interesting profession to be in.
What do you love about it?
I love the fact that I get to work hand in hand with my patients. I really get to develop that relationship. And also have, again, my hand in so many pots. So in addition to providing clinical care, I have research projects I'm involved with or leading. I'm involved in policy work, nonprofit work. All those examples I spoke to are ways that I get to incorporate that kind of work into my career. And I love that that's sort of what keeps me engaged and is something that always is changing for me.
So how can we better support and retain nurses?
I think there's a lot that goes into this, but specific to support and retention, we cannot underestimate the value of mentorship. Because when nurses are provided the tools they need to succeed and to pursue avenues that are meaningful to them, we know that that leads to better outcomes, not only for nurses, but for other health professions, as well as the people and populations that they collaboratively serve.
For somebody considering a career in nursing today, what would you say to them?
I think when it comes to nursing, there is that personal piece that I think each of us brings to our work. And we need more of that. We need more perspectives and the value that people bring to the profession through not only their lived experience, but also their unique insights. Because when patients can see themselves in their healthcare providers and feel understood, that's what allows us to provide best possible care and ultimately improve health outcomes.
I don't know about you, but in my friend group, the show Adolescence, I mean, we're all talking about it. It's raising troubling questions about toxic masculinity and how boys in particular can get drawn into this at a young age.
So we spoke with Andrew Wong. He's a child psychologist in Toronto, and David St. Arnaud, who leads the Anchor Men's Group. It's a prominent support group for men in Edmonton.
And these two men, they host a podcast called Taking Good Care. In their latest episode, they talk about toxic masculinity and its allure for young men.
Andrew, I'm going to start with you. The show raises this really tough question. How does a young man get pulled into harmful thinking? How does this land with them? How do they get sucked in?
Yeah, we really think Adolescence did a good job in highlighting some of the factors. And some of the factors were very evident. Others were a little bit more nuanced. But certainly some of the major ones is pure rejection. So when we talk about being rejected from a social group, being rejected by somebody who may seem very important to you, there may be bullying and teasing involved. And when someone gets really hurt, they may want to hurt somebody back. There may be a bit of revenge, especially if they're so hurt. And we have to factor into any kind of mental health issues that the person already has. So when we think about if someone is feeling very low and they're thinking, you know what, I have nothing more to lose here. When someone gets into that state of mind, they may become vengeful. And of course, one of the other big factors is social influence. So when we talk about, peer groups that somebody is hanging out with, and social media nowadays, I think plays a big role because information travels so quickly.
What is it about the words that they're hearing, though, or the conversations that they're observing that hook them in? Like, what are the things that are attracting them specifically?
I think one of the pieces, especially if we talk, let's say, about social media nowadays, we talk about reels on Instagram and YouTube. If someone is speaking with you and you're trying to find yourself as your identity, someone is speaking to you and they are charming, they're speaking confidently, and they're exuding this message. And you're not sure, you're still trying to find your place in society. Who am I as an adolescent? You may gravitate to that message.
David, I want to bring you into this conversation. What is it about adolescence that makes some boys more vulnerable to these kinds of conversations in this community?
Well, I think adolescence in and of itself is a vulnerable state. So we know that adolescents are more prone to risk-taking and sensation seeking. So that in and of itself, and then when we start to look at which boys might be more vulnerable, again, I think like Andrew was saying, those that are socially isolated, and often we find that there's a perception of injustice. So there's a looking for why they've been mistreated or are feeling unhappy with their circumstances or their themselves. So they're looking for those answers, and unfortunately, there can be readily available answers on the internet that may actually lead to more harm for themselves and for others.
What are some of the signs then or changes in behavior, David, that may suggest that somebody is being pulled into some of these harmful ideologies?
Well, again, I think as a parent or a caregiver for an adolescent, you have to be a bit of a detective and pay attention to clues, because they often are also at this stage in life that they're pushing against a lot of the adults or parents in their life. And so they're going to be perhaps harder to notice these changes, but one of the things is that they don't change quickly. These are generally gradual changes, but you're looking for any significant changes in personality, mood, even appetite, their interests, grades in school, how much time they're spending on the internet.
What about language? What kind of language should be a red flag that maybe there's some dialogue or communication that could be harmful?
So I would add in terms of the language, so not just seeing what their behaviors are, but listening, right? So hearing any kind of hostile language towards certain groups. Even in the classroom, a teacher can observe and listen. Are there a certain group of kids who are sort of pitting men against women? That very traditional sense, oh, this is what men should be like, and this is what women should be like. So just listening for some of those things in the classroom or even at home.
Andrew, going back to the show, you see the frustration and the desperation of parents in this show, but I know that it is echoed by families in real life who have found themselves in this situation saying, I'm hearing this, I'm seeing this, I don't know how to access my kid, and I don't know how to instigate change. So what can they do?
So when parents, caregivers, and even teachers see some of these things, one of the things that Dave and I always say is, don't criticize, right? Try to leave the judgment out of it, but have a conversation. Whenever we criticize and judge, we're putting a wedge and we're dividing people. We're dividing ourselves with the teenagers. What we really want to do is have a conversation to connect. The more information that we can find out, and by having a conversation, then we can move forward. We're essentially telling them, I'm going to give you the attention, I'm going to give you my time to talk about this. And by creating a bond and a trust, then we can start to perhaps influence and navigate them in a different direction if that's where they want to go, and if we think that that's the way that we need to navigate that.
You're listening to Your Morning, the podcast, where we bring you some of the best conversations from our show every week. You can join us live on CTV every weekday, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app. You know, the great thing about this team is every once in a while something will come up and we'll share it as a group and suddenly we're having this like 15-minute conversation about it. You sent this great article last night that I was reading through and it really got me thinking.
Yeah, because this has a lot to do with the age that your children are at right now, and really anybody with children in your life. You can start to think about what they need to know and what skills they should have by the time they launch into the world. So I found this so interesting because the author of this is a Globe and Mail piece, gives a list of 11, what did she say? 11 skills that they should have mastered by now by the age of 18. And this all started because the author, who is Catherine Martinko, she said that she was trying to do a whole bunch of stuff and, you know, get through the day, and she had a huge list of what she needed to do. And her son was sitting on the couch and like watching TV, and then turned to her and was like, "What's for dinner?" And in that moment, she realized that she could delegate to her, you know, 18-year-old son. And he did make dinner, and it empowered him. Right? And she went,
and not
"Wait a
only make
second."
dinner, she sent him to get the groceries,
She sent
which
him to
I
get the
also think
groceries.
is smart.
And subsequently, he's really enjoyed doing that. So I want to go through this list because I think it's really interesting. And you can think about the children in your life right now, or your teenagers, your nieces, nephews, or children. So here's what she says that we need to be able to do. 11 life skills mastered by the age of 18. Okay, so talk to strangers, whether it's, you know, somebody working at a store, a professor, landlord, coworker. A young adult should know how to carry on a polite, engaging conversation. This is one of the things we're doing with our kids, to be able to have a conversation. I didn't know this was a taught behavior. Instead of just answering questions asked of you, to engage by asking a question back. Navigate new locations. So basically, like, can you get around? Right? Can you get around? Managing your time. So keeping track of your own schedule and workload without a reminder from the parent. I mean, we do that so often. And cope with adversity. At 18, kids must be able to cope with the ups and downs of life, you know, realizing that obstacles are, you know, a normal part of how we live.
I love that cope with adversity. You and I have talked about this before, the book called Grit, which says without any resistance, kids don't have grit. Without grit, you don't have traction. Without traction, you can't move forward. I love that whole idea because our instinct is to try and make it easier for them.
Totally.
And in the long run, you make it harder. The other things on that list, which I love, are remain focused. Help run a household. So can you clean up? Do you know how to buy things when they run out in the house?
You know how to do laundry.
And then
know how to remove the snow. Do you know how to shovel?
Yeah, good one.
And like take care of grass and like clean up the outside, because that's also part of like being a grown-up.
And how to properly clean the bathroom.
Yeah.
These are all taught behaviors. Also care for yourselves. You know, I had that song with my kids, hair, face, teeth, deodorant. Like that was the mental checklist they had to do before they were allowed to leave the house. Hair, face, teeth, deodorant.
Hair, face, teeth, deodorant.
Yeah, is your hair brushed? Is your face washed? Do you have deodorant on? Have you brushed your teeth?
That's so
I love that. I think so important on the list would be earn and manage money. That's the next one given to us by this author. So it's the idea of like, how do you obviously hold down a job, but then how much do things cost? And then learning how to live within your means. Because I think that is a big
That's
struggle.
a whole separate lesson.
Well, God, when we don't deal with physical money, when it's all on tap, it's really easy to lose track of that. Learning how to take risks. I think for kids, especially today, who hear the words "be careful" so often, it is really tough to feel safe taking risks, but it's a huge part of being an adult to move forward in life. And then to be able to sit alone with their thoughts. When we have an entire generation of people who watch parents and adults not be able to sit alone with their thoughts, they've learned that that's a weird thing to do. So to be able to put your phone away for an hour or two and not have anything to distract you and be comfortable with that. Because in those moments, as we know, that's when all kind of the scary stuff comes up in your brain, and your brain will tell you all sorts of stories. To be able to navigate through that and know that that's not the end of the world, it's pretty normal for your brain to have a negative view of the world. That's okay. To be able to do that as a kid, that's amazing.
And so when you look at this list with 3 17-year-olds.
So I would say they all, to varying degrees, they're all good at a lot of those things. But the conversation one, how to ask and how to listen, listening is a learned behavior.
Question for the room. Who has started spring cleaning? Yes, of course you have. Well, listen, have you spring cleaned your home, or have you also spring cleaned your relationships? Sometimes they need a refresh too.
Now I feel guilty. Well, now is the perfect time to take inventory of the people around us and make sure our relationships are helping us grow.
I'm helping you grow.
Thank you.
Leadership expert is also helping us grow, Kendra Reddy. She has more on this.
So I love this idea of going through our relationships because they are such a big part of life. Now, you say it is totally normal for these relationships to evolve, but we don't really talk about it. So what does that change actually look like in real life?
I think there's so much pressure to find the one romantic soulmate, soulmate, the one Anne of Green Gables best friend.
Your best bosom buddy.
Exactly. Life doesn't work like that. And if we put all of our fulfillment in one other person's hands, then we lose our sovereignty. Relationships are meant to evolve because as we evolve and go through life, our priorities change. We move, we experience loss, we take new jobs, we get married, we have kids. So it's so unrealistic to expect that everyone is going to change at the same pace, at the same time, in the same direction, all at once.
And our relationships are going to look different than how another person's look.
Yeah, and if you leave room in your relationships for them to stretch and change shape, that's what keeps them real, relevant, and rooted in choice, not obligation.
Oh, I love this. Okay, so sometimes it's clear
Yeah.
that a relationship needs to shift.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like the kid that, or the person that you were friends with when you were kids and now you're grown-ups and it's feeling weird. Anyway, you feel those signs. They might be subtle. How can we know when it's time to take that step back and reassess?
Yeah, sometimes it's subtle and sometimes it's not. You don't need to wait for a crisis to have an alignment check in a relationship. It's really healthy because if we never pause to evaluate, then we run the risk of performing connection instead of actually like feeling it. And no one wants that.
Yeah, no kidding. So here are some examples that you've given us. You could feel drained or anxious. You're showing up out of obligation. You're avoiding those texts or calls. I mean, that right there, those are like the little red flags you should not ignore.
Your body will tell you, yeah. If you're feeling cringy or any kind of a way, listen to those signals for sure.
If you've decided it's time to have that conversation, how do we do that?
Okay, so first of all, I'd say don't try to not make it awkward because it's going to be a little awkward. You just have to kind of let that happen. And saying things like, I need some space or something has changed for me, it feels hard, but ghosting or breadcrumbing creates guesswork for the other person. And so when we are, this is the leadership skill, brave enough to speak with courageous honesty, then everyone gets dignity and clarity.
Okay, we go through many different versions of ourselves
yes.
in our lives, and sometimes people are only with us for a chapter.
Yes.
Can you talk about that idea and why it's okay to let go?
Yes. Season, a reason, and a chapter is true, and it's also true that it's okay for us to outgrow people and for people to outgrow us. We also have to remember there's never just one season, so people can rotate in and out. When you're willing to let go, it creates space for new things to come in and maybe for you to grow in a way that you couldn't in the previous relationship dynamic.
There is such a freedom in
Yes.
that, in here, even in just listening to you say that.
Yes.
There's like a forgiveness that happens where it's like, oh, it's okay if like
Yes.
this relationship changed.
I want to show up out of a sense of love, not out of a sense of duty.
I really like that tip about letting go is not the failure, right? That they were there for a season or a time in your life, and then those things can change.
Those things can change, and your priorities of what you follow and what you can consume can change as well. I find that, especially on social media, I see how my follows have evolved, and I've seen how my unfollows evolve as well. And my favorite tool, I feel like these days, is the mute button, because sometimes like that unfollow, it has so much weight to it, and people like hyper focus. Like, God, if a celebrity unfollows someone else, everybody knows about it. So instead, the mute function is very handy. You can mute specific words. You can mute certain people.
They see if you mute?
No, they have no idea.
Yeah.
So you don't have to consume, but you don't also have to have that conversation. Kendra challenges you to have that conversation, to say, listen, it's okay to talk about these hard things. It's okay to be uncomfortable. Sometimes that hasn't always rang true for me, where I think I don't want to have that confrontation with somebody. I just need to ghost them a little bit. And so that's the polite way to ghost. Mute.
Mute in real life too?
I wish.
Mute in real life. I will say, you know, and I'm hearing everything she's saying, but there are two relationships in my life that if I could sort of buy into that idea of like some relationships are just for season, these are friendships, that I go, I wish I had put more work into it to have it continue. You know what I mean? It's like one of those, and I think about it quite often. These are people that were very close to me in the first 25 years of my life, sort of thing. And I go, you know what? I think that was on me because I think we could have continued it, right? And maybe that wasn't supposed to be for a season.
Yeah.
But I think about that often.
But maybe that's the opportunity and the invitation for you to reach back out.
Yeah.
Right? And to say, hey, I wish I would have. I miss you.
I know.
Maybe let's go for coffee. But all of that,
What
it's
if they've
all
muted
hard.
me?
Well, then
Then I'm done.
I mean, then they just won't reply.
That's true.
So you'll never know.
So nothing has changed then. If you
Yeah, that's
reach
true.
out and they don't respond, then nothing has changed. If they reach out and respond, then you've had a chance to either have an honest conversation and share what you were feeling and maybe get some feedback from them. And then the positive, like the best outcome is that you reconnect.
That's true. I'll keep you posted. You know them, you love them. Adam Wylde and Jax Irwin are back. The former Toronto radio stars have launched a new podcast. It's already full of viral moments. One of the biggest, Left on Red, where listeners spill about being ghosted. Take a listen.
All right, let's welcome Gabby to Left on Red. Gabby has been seeing Mel for 4 months, and it's gone about as well as things can go until the last 6 days where Mel has completely disappeared. So, Gabby, that's left you really confused.
Yeah, I am absolutely confused. I would even say that I am completely confused, and I really just totally don't get it.
Just a lot of confusion and mystery. Okay, no, I'm sorry.
So much awkwardness. Adam and Jax are with us here now. Good morning. It's so nice to see both of you again. It's been a minute.
Thank you for having us. It's been good to be here.
Let's talk about Left on Red, because obviously it's a fan favorite.
Yep.
I love it. It's these stories about people who get ghosted. What do you think it is about those experiences that have people go I need to hear more, and how this ends?
The cringe, the pure cringe of it, you're hooked, and there's this level of discomfort that you should probably not want to watch, but you just keep staying.
I also think we've all been there, and we've all wanted to find out, but I think it's sort of like the other end of the story. It's I can't believe that person, I thought things were going so well, and you never hear from them again.
Right.
Imagine if you could, and then you realize, oh yeah, that could be a train wreck. I don't want to know that. Sometimes you just don't want to know the answer.
A mystery finally gets solved, and sometimes it's a mystery that shouldn't get solved.
Exactly.
But it's a lot of fun to do.
And how do you guys emotionally deal with that? Because I would be so stressed out.
Antidepressants.
Yeah.
Just full medication.
You know what? We've done it for a long, long time.
Yeah.
We started doing it here, obviously, on the radio, and so I don't want to say you become numb to it, because you don't, but you definitely are okay, I'm putting the shield up for this one.
Yeah.
And I hope, sometimes people seem so great too, and then it turns out they've done something really weird, and you're like, okay, well, I did not judge you properly.
I have no idea what could have went wrong. It's we can now tell what went wrong.
Well, and then you get the full story.
Oh, yeah.
What an assessment of people.
Yeah.
You two have such great chemistry. We've always known that. How did you first meet, the two of you? Were you just put together, or did you know each other first?
We worked together on a radio station here in Toronto together when I first originally moved here from Nova Scotia. Adam was doing the afternoon show, I was doing the midday show. And we had been told by mutual friends that we would get along, and I was actually always a big fan of Adam's work. Adam's 6 months older than me, so I've always looked up to him.
I did overnights at a radio station in Halifax while she was in college. So she was.
I've always been a big fan of
they
him.
listened.
So, and then when I met him, I was like, "You are mine forever. You're gonna be my friend forever."
Yeah.
And it was immediate.
You say that to people, but legitimately, you guys have been together for how many years now?
Well, we worked together on directly for five years, and now I think we're year 7 or 8 or something.
Yeah.
But when you moved here, was that 10 or 11 years ago?
That was almost 11 years ago, yeah.
Literally the day that she moved here, as a part of bringing her in, it was St. Patrick's Day. I remember picking her up in my car. I had a little 2-seater car. It was very cool back then.
Very small car.
And, and I drove
fast.
her to the bar, and we were doing a big station sort of St. Patrick's Day night, and that was introducing Jax to everybody. So that's kind of where it all started.
My old guy, he's always here for me.
That's so fun. Yeah. Okay, so what's it been like going from sort of a traditional radio format to the podcast format?
Hours of the day are better. Not having to wake up early, and I'm sorry, Lindsay. But I think the other thing is, we're doing it out of Jax's house. So it was her old master bedroom. She's since moved her bed into another room, so we could use the bed.
Into the attic. Into the attic.
She's living in the attic.
More room for Adam and I to record,
I think it's funny. I'm glad for the time that we had in radio, because it taught us sort of the ropes and what works. But there's a little less oversight, and that's not so bad, right? Sometimes you can be a little bit more creative and do things that maybe your boss in the past or somebody else may not have liked, but you know the audience will. And that's the great thing about online, is that you will find an audience no matter how niche it is.
Yeah. How do you guys come up with the content?
So obviously the Left on Reds kind of do themselves, but I think beyond that, we've always done things that are topical, right? What's in the news and that sort of thing. But in radio, we had to keep things very 3 minutes, 3 minutes at a time. I have to get back to playing the music. So we get to go a little bit deeper now and, go down the rabbit hole for celebrity stuff. So everything from Meghan and Harry to whatever's going on with Justin Bieber right now. And then some personal life stuff too, which makes it easy. Jax bought a drone because she's single, and she spent a whole weekend learning how to fly a drone, and I'm like, at 37.
No, I'm scared. The sky is scary.
I was like, did you get a license for that? I think you need a license to do that downtown.
As long as it's under a certain weight, Adam Wylde, I can fly it in the sky, okay?
Yeah. If you want more of this, by the way, listen to their podcast. Adam and Jax, do you ever go by Axe?
We should.
That's your combo
what
name.
What about Jadam?
Look at that brand.
Jadam. I like that.
Adam Wylde.
Adam Wylde and Jax on your favorite podcast platform.
Well, the new movie Juliet and Romeo blends Shakespeare with music in a brand new way. Take a look.
I saw you. You were fighting with the Montagues.
And you? Juliet, daughter of Capulet.
They say the world is spinning round, but you come along and time slows down.
I should properly introduce myself. I'm
Romeo.
I knew that
He is Romeo. It is a pop musical set in medieval times, a fresh take on Romeo and Juliet with a brand new soundtrack and an all-star cast. Toronto actor and musician Max Parker steps into the role of Benvolio, Romeo's loyal cousin, and he joins us in studio this morning. Max does not Benvolio. Great to have you in.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so this is not your typical Shakespeare take. Juliet and Romeo, it's kind of reimagining the whole story, and I love what you said to me off camera. You said in a family-friendly way.
Totally. It's very family-friendly. We put like a fantastic twist on this. You know, there's pop music that is in tandem with this film, and, you know, just the fact that we're kind of rejigging the Shakespearean tale a bit, I think is fantastic, and I think viewers are going to get a kick out of it for sure.
It is so vibrant. When you watch the trailer, like the colors just explode off the screen, and you can't take your eyes away. We know Benvolio. He's always like the voice of reason.
Yes.
In this story, the very loyal cousin of Romeo. What is your take on this character?
Yeah, this version of Benvolio is just so, I think, very much more internal. In this version, you kind of sense that there's a weight on his shoulders, like he's carrying the weight of the world, and he really does feel like everything's his fault because he just wants everything to kind of go properly. And I mean, that is classic Benvolio, but I think really you kind of see it internally within him. Yeah.
Max, you are born and raised Toronto, and for people who know you, they probably know you best not for your acting, but for your voice.
Mm-hmm.
And you sing in this as well. Take a look. Okay, so take me back to audition days. When you prep for a role like this, because I've done like teeny tiny acting things,
Yeah.
and there's enough to remember when you come to your lines and the sides that you get. Then you have to prepare music for this. So what did you prep?
Totally. And I mean, they wanted us to sing a couple songs for this audition as well. So it was really exciting to not only do a side, but to also really bring my vocal talent to this. I feel like that was a strong suit for me, especially in the audition process. So that was something that I think kind of got me cast, honestly. And the fact that, you know, we would be recording, you know, music in Rome while we were rehearsing, like, you know, sword fighting, horse riding, practicing all these different things, you know, doing this type of stuff and like lip syncing and actually sometimes singing while, you know, things were dubbing in. Like, there was just so much like going at play. And I think everything kind of worked together to just make this such a new and fresh film that has this, you know, Romeo and Juliet story embedded.
Okay, that's it for the podcast today.
For more great conversations, download or hit subscribe to Your Morning the Podcast on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget, watch us live weekday mornings on CTV CTV News Channel or on your CTV News app. Start your morning with us.